Welcome back, fight fans, to another episode of BTR Boxing Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Bastow, joined by my compatriot and podcasting host, Johnston Brown. Great weekend for boxing, Johnston. We were looking forward to one particular fight. It's caused a lot of controversy for various different reasons, and it was Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders. And obviously, by now, everybody knows the result. Everybody knows Canelo got the victory by a retirement from Billy Joe's corner at the end of the 8th round. And we're here to break this down and discuss the fight and discuss how we think it went, what happened in the aftermath of the retirement in the corner, what social media has been talking about over the past few days, the extent, of course, of Billy Joe's injuries as well. You know, that's something quite significant to talk about and how that's going to impact him in the future. So first and foremost, Johnson, coming to you, what did you think about the fight?
Oh, I really enjoyed it. I done the usual, have a little sleep and then wake up to it. I just about managed to drag myself up. I was tempted to leave it and then sort of watch it later on a replay, but I was eager to really see. I like these big fights. I love to see them live. So I'm not like as young as I used to. I'm not no spring chicken anymore. So I definitely couldn't stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning and then watch it. But good fight. Look, the fight I enjoyed it. Considering I was half a kip, it woke me up and it got me into the fight because I was quite pleased with how Billy was performing. I thought Canelo, the first couple of rounds weren't really nothing really much to happen. I mean, Billy used his footwork well, threw off some jabs, but I was impressed with how he was standing there and not necessarily on the run all the time. Canelo closed the gap at times, but it was a couple of rounds in particular I thought Billy was pretty awesome. The 5th round, the 6th round, I think it was the 6th. It was either the 4th, 5th, or 6th. It was two of those rounds. One in particular where Billy was moving excellently to the side, shifting away. Canelo was struggling to deal with that southpaw stance, but yet, well, it ended how it ended. At one point, it looked like Billy was on top, and then that round changed everything when he got caught with that uppercut and effectively ended the fight. But I was impressed with Billy, and for me, I had Billy up. I don't know how you felt, Sean. I thought Billy was just slightly in the lead. I don't think Canelo did enough to win certain rounds, but as we already said, we always knew that he was going to be up on the cards, and I think that was evident in the scorecards that were produced at the end of that fight.
Well, for me, I felt like it was a good performance to a degree from Billy Joe Saunders. I felt like there was rounds that you mentioned there where he did seem to put his foot on the gas a little bit. There was the best shot from Billy Joe Saunders was the one where it was a short right hand. I think it was a short right or a short left hand on the inside, and he sort of followed through, and it looked like his elbow had followed through after it. You know, like a bit of gypsy kung fu going on.
Ones.
Yeah. Throwing his elbow in at the same time. I mean, he landed some good shots as the rounds progressed. But for me, Canelo did exactly what we expected him to do, which was he started off pretty slow. He had the variety of shots, selecting from head to body. And as the rounds went on, he seemed to step it up each round. And it was like he was obviously figuring the puzzle out of what Billy Joe had brought to the table. And it was only a matter of time before he was going to catch up with him. And eventually, as the rounds went on, he did start to catch up with him. And eventually that shot that landed, that uppercut, which he was throwing, I think, for the previous 2 rounds and was very close. I think he did land the uppercut the round before the 8th round, the 7th, and the one that actually landed was one where Billy Joe had obviously threw a shot. He'd missed the shot, and obviously it left him open, and the uppercut was there, and it was just a nice little, it was like a trap that Canelo had set. The way I saw it was like Canelo had waited, he hated Billy Joe in, waited for him to throw the shot missed, Canelo took the opportunity. As Billy Joe was trying to get out of the way, it's landed really flush at the side of his face, on the cheek and on the eye. And at that point, we didn't know what the damage was. And obviously, Billy Joe backed up. To be fair to him, he took it like an absolute trooper. A lot of people might have gone down from that shot, and he didn't. He took it, and he survived the round to get to the corner. And you can see in the corner, his eyes puffed up. Now, the damage doesn't look as bad at first. And I think that's why, all the stuff that people have been talking about on social media was so evident in the immediate aftermath after the fight had happened, because it does look like it's just a bit of a puffed eye. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Well, why is he retiring on his school? Why is the corner pulling him out? You know, we had the same issue with Daniel Dubois. We didn't know the severity of what that damage, what that punch had caused in terms of the damage. So when you see that happen and you see the fight's over, automatically you're thinking, has he just decided to throw in the towel here? What's happening? You know, you don't know. And then you start to hear rumours of his corner pulling him out. That was obviously later confirmed by Mark Tibbs in an interview afterwards. He pulled him out. He goes to the hospital. Obviously, an hour or so later, it gets confirmed that he has fractured his orbital bone and he's fractured his cheek in 3 different places. And even Canelo came out afterwards and said, as soon as I hit him with it, I knew it broke his cheekbone. And
Wow.
there you go. That's the severity of that punch that he received. And I think Mark Tibbs did an excellent job of pulling him out of the fight, because at the end of the day, the fighter's health is what matters. And what's caused a big stir up on social media and all the flack that Billy Joe's taking is because of comments he made about Daniel Dubois previously. He called Daniel Dubois a quitter. He was one of them that we were talking about after the Dubois-Joyce fight, where it's like, you can't sit there and say that about somebody until you've been in that situation yourself. And, you know, Billy Joe didn't say anything about it in the aftermath. He's just basically come out now and said that, you know, I've got 3 fractures in my cheekbone. I've got a fracture in my orbital bone. I will be back. So it's a pretty horrific injury. And I honestly question, if he does come back out, how good is he going to be? I mean, I remember Kell Brook losing to Golovkin, his orbital bone going, and then him just really never being the same again after that fight. And a lot of people think that that fight ruined him. And Billy Joe, this was his legacy defining performance. I think he did really well. I just think he was beaten by a far superior man on the night.
I think you're right. So first point is the one thing I would have to say is, when scoring these fights, is the punch stats, which do drive me nuts. So I've mentioned it before, but just a question to you: how do you determine what a power punch is and what just a normal punch is? And is a power punch worth more points than if someone's popping off a jab? That's where I get a bit confused. Before we move on to Daniel Dubois, the stuff that was said there and everywhere else, but just reading some comments and seeing other people and how they judge a fight. So if someone's throwing jabs and they're on the move and they're throwing more shots, few getting through, most of them hitting the gloves, and then someone throws what someone considers to be a power punch and lands, does that sway your opinion on how a round should be scored?
It's dependent upon how you vision what a power punch does to a fighter. How effective is a jab? You know, it stops a fighter in the tracks if you throw enough of them at a fighter. But a power punch, to me, is more effective, because I consider a power punch to be a punch that really knocks a fighter back. Doesn't essentially wobble them or stagger them as such, but you see the effect it has on them in the sense that they back off. Whereas when you receive a jab, a lot of the times, you know, unless you've ever received a jab, you won't really know. When you do receive a jab, essentially you get a little bit of a sting and then you carry on going forward. Whereas a power punch, you sort of take a step back and you regroup, you know, and make sure that you don't get hit by that same shot again. And that's the whole point of it. So in terms of scoring a round, it's difficult, because you could have a combination of some really good jabs that set up a power punch, and then you kind of score it based off the amount that's been landed. I always thought it's about, you know, not getting hit. The art of the sport is hitting and not getting hit. So if you land more shots in a round, regardless of whether you maybe don't look as busy as the other fighter, then surely you should be going off that, as opposed to just maybe a fighter looks busy and he lands the loads on the gloves and the arms. Isn't it more significant to be actually scoring the shots that are actually landing, as opposed to maybe a fighter that looks busier? That's the way I see it. Anyway, I don't know about you. What do you think about
that? Yeah, that's exactly how, you know, I judge a fight. I try to break it down. You got 3 minutes. I try to do it by a minute and a half, because you get them fighters that do nothing for like 2.5 minutes, and then they pick up the pace in the last 30 seconds just so they can get the judges' sway, which is another thing that tends to happen. But, you know, if you are hitting, if you're throwing jabs and you're hitting, it is about how many times you get hit. A power punch, to me, does not mean that someone should get, you know, I'm not going to score that anymore. So if you're landing a jab and you land a power punch, to me, you still landed. It doesn't matter. Obviously, the power punches are effective later on in a fight when a fighter will be worn down. I suppose the other thing is well, one thing I noticed as well is Canelo was pushed back quite a lot of times from Billy Joe. First time I'd ever seen that, where someone had pushed Canelo back. Callum Smith didn't do it once against him, whereas Billy Joe did. And I was impressed with that. The only other person I've seen do that is Golovkin, and it just proves how hard those two guys are, Golovkin and Canelo, in terms of their power and their resistance to being hit. Their heads are just solid, and they've got granite chins and far superior punching power for anyone in their weight divisions. It's incredible. It really is. They are the superstars of boxing, and I suppose the only other one I can think of is like an Inoue who can do that. Those three in particular, they're just powerhouses, and Canelo proved that once again. But really impressed with Billy pushing him back. But just going back to what you mentioned earlier with Daniel Dubois, when we did mention Billy Joe, I mean, just to say, look, I did find a quote. People have been putting them all out there, but Billy Joe Saunders, when Daniel Dubois decided to take a knee, he said, if I had 2 eye sockets that were broken, my jaw was broken, my teeth were out, my nose was smashed, my brain was beaten, I was not stopping until I was knocked out or worse. Now, to defend Billy Joe, I would say he didn't actually he was pulled out. So would he have continued if his corner said, go back out and get knocked out? So there is an argument for Billy to turn around and say, I can defend those comments because my corner pulled me out. But it wasn't much resistance from him. I think he accepted it. But the one thing I will say is one thing we've always said about Daniel Dubois is his maturity for such a young man. And you know what he wrote? He wrote, this is Daniel Dubois after Billy Joe Saunders' defeat. He said, you fought well, Billy Joe Saunders. Hope your eye heals up quickly and you can come back a stronger champ. And then he also added, I'm not going to rub it in for Billy. He'll be going through it now with the eye injury. Maybe he will regret what he said about me. Maybe this might teach him something. It could be a life lesson. And considering there's 10 years difference between those guys, it just makes me love Daniel Dubois even more. What a credit to the sport, and what a humble young man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great that he's put it out there like that, because obviously everybody was sort of coming to Daniel Dubois' defense because of what Billy Joe had said, and they were using that as their platform to be able to obviously have a go at Billy Joe Saunders. I understand reasons for why people don't like him anyway, and I do understand that, but I'm just looking at it from a pure boxing standpoint, and him as a performer in the ring, and I think he put a good performance on, and I think the way the fight was going, I could see it going the distance before the end of the 8th round. I could see it being quite close. You mentioned the cards earlier. You said you had Billy Joe up. I don't agree. I kind of think that Canelo, I wouldn't say it was as wide as what it was. I think there was only 2 points in it for me between the two. I think it was 77-75. I think I had it to Canelo. I just think he took a few of the early rounds before Billy started to apply that pressure, and as you say, started to actually make any sort of impact on Canelo. But the thing with Canelo is, as soon as he stepped it up when he needed to, and he started setting them traps, and he knew he could get to Billy Joe Saunders, that's effectively when the fight was coming to an end, because obviously he landed that one shot and it changed everything. And they say that, don't they? One shot can change everything in the sport, and he did, and that's what happened. And fair play to Billy Joe, fair play to Canelo for stepping up and doing what he's done. And now he just proves once again that he is just the greatest pound fighter out there at the moment, and that's why we keep saying it and we keep banging on about it, that people just don't appreciate how good of a fighter he really is. And he just seems to, whatever challenge gets put in front of him, he seems to be able to master that challenge and come out of the other side of it. And I suppose the questions I want to ask now are 2 questions. First of all, let's talk about Canelo, and who does he fight next? And what is he fighting?
I mean, the first thing is Caleb Plant, isn't it? Because he holds that other title now. If he goes and beats Caleb, he unifies it, or he becomes a unified champion. He unifies all the belts. That has got to be the target. Caleb Plant hasn't said too much that I've seen. I don't see why anyone wouldn't want to fight Canelo. I think you're going to earn a bundle of cash. So, and I don't think Caleb Plant's the type of guy that would turn it down. I don't think anyone would, to be fair, unless you unless your team around you just want to just sort of keep hold of that title for other reasons. If you want to earn the big money, the fight's there. That's got to be the fight for Canelo next. He has. I'm not saying it's not going to be a soft touch at all. Caleb Plant is a fighter that we put up there as the best super middleweight around. We put him up there with Billy Joe, Callum Smith. He's alongside those guys. Not necessarily, he doesn't get the respect that we believe. I think we're both we're fans of the guy. He's got a great background story and everything in it. He's got the ability to put Canelo under some trouble potentially, but let's face it, Canelo is head and shoulders above anybody in that division. There's nobody that's really going to beat Canelo. No matter how good, if you had Caleb Plant, you had Billy Joe Saunders, and you had Callum Smith, the three of them could beat each other. It would be quite close. When you put Canelo in there, he's just too strong. He's too good. He will just, as you said about earlier with Billy Joe, he just set those traps. He'd do the same with Caleb Plant, and eventually, I think he'll get him out there or win on a point decision. But I think that's got to be the next goal. And then after that, he tends to like having a fight in between. So you might get a little fight against some random guy first. But I think the only way Canelo's going to get beaten, like anyone making their way through the divisions, is the weight class. Eventually, the weight class will beat Canelo. And whether it be Bivol didn't have a great performance against Craig Richards. Craig Richards put in a valiant performance, but Bivol against Canelo at light heavyweight is definitely a strong possibility. Bivol's not a massive light heavyweight. He can actually fight super middleweight. He's even turned around and said, I'll fight him a super middleweight. So there's another option if you wanted to go down that route as well. So look, the only thing, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you had Canelo fight at cruiserweight the way he's going at the minute, to be honest with you.
Well, there's a couple of points I wanted to make before we move on and talk about Billy Joe and the aftermath for him. Two things I wanted to really point out is that obviously Canelo, first and foremost, has fought 3 times in 70 days now. That is amazing, to be honest with you. He's fought Callum Smith, Avery Yildirim, and now obviously he's beat Billy Joe Saunders. For a champion, for his status to be fighting that often at this stage of his career, I'll give him a clap for that.
Yeah,
I really have, because
absolutely.
You don't see many champions.
I'm with you.
You don't see many champions doing that in this day and age. He's a true fighting champion. He really is, and it probably sounds like we're really up his backside, but it's not that. I just actually really appreciate when a fighter can do as much as he can, and he can be as active as he can. And let's be honest, 2 out of them 3 fights have been legitimate challenges. Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, the Avrim Yildirim one wasn't so much, because we've seen how Eubank Jr. destroyed him a couple of years ago. So I wasn't really expecting anything other than a Canelo win. But with Smith, it was like, can Smith do something here? He's got the height and the reach. With Billy Joe, he's got the technical ability and the ring craftsmanship. And yet Canelo's come through all of them tests and he marches on yet again. So that's the first point I wanted to make. And the second point is, regarding this fight, if you remember, like, the activity of Billy Joe wasn't as good as what obviously Canelo's has been. And for me, like, Canelo's been perfecting this craft for 8 years solid. The guy never takes a step out of the gym, and he's always in the gym. And yet Billy Joe Saunders, he's always in and out of the gym, and he can't really do something like that, beat a Canelo in just a short matter of 8 weeks training, whereas Canelo is a guy that lives in the gym and he's never out of it. He's always trying to learn. And for me, that's also a big point to make here, is that Canelo's never out of the gym. Billy Joe was in and out of the gym. He's in activity, probably didn't help him as well. So how can you expect to beat a pound-for-pound fighter with only 8 weeks' notice when a guy like Canelo's in their gym, 7-8 years solid? I just don't think you can expect a whole deal from it. I think Billy Joe, based on all that information, I think he put on a really good performance, and credit to him. But the big question is how does it affect him going forward? These injuries, how will they affect his career going forward? And if he should come back and he doesn't retire after this because of them injuries, who does he fight next? And for me, I'll give my opinion quickly. Chris Eubank Jr. laughing at him on social media. Got be that for me, a rematch between them two. It makes money over here. It makes sense as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's if he's able to overcome the injury and he's able to not quit, not have to retire, hopefully that doesn't happen. You don't want that to happen to any sportsman in any sport. I'm hoping he will. He's 31. He's still quite young, so the chances are give himself 6, 7 months, 9 months. I don't know, maybe possibly even another year. And then Eubank Jr., especially if he keeps himself busy, the rematch is there. The first fight was a good fight. Billy Joe took that first half, and he sort of buckled under the pressure, didn't he? Really, from Eubank. Eubank effectively came back later on in that second and had a good old surge, but it wasn't enough in the end. It's a fight I'd like to see. It's going to be good for publicity. It'll be a fight that's going to sell quite easily. They're both outspoken. They'll be quite fun in all the build-up and in the actual fight. I think there's no other fight really for Billy, unless Callum Smith sticks about at super middle. But I'm guessing Callum's probably going to want to move up to light heavyweight. So yeah, there's not really much else out there for Billy Joe. Just hope that he can recover, and hopefully, as Daniel Dubois said, hopefully he's changed his ways a little bit in his opinion on what Daniel went through when he had his injury, and he decided himself he had to take the knee that night. And I think we back Daniel all the time. Sean, we really did back Daniel when he did that. We never give him any bad publicity. We was slating anyone else that did. And I'm not saying anyone came back at us or anything, but I think people's tune have started to change since then. And I think it's another lesson learned with Billy. You can't be slagging people off while you're an active fighter, saying I wouldn't quit and I wouldn't do that until you actually are in that situation. And hopefully other fighters will learn from Billy and from Daniel.
No, I agree. I wholeheartedly agree on that, and I think maybe it'll humble him a little bit. I hope it does. I do hope it humbles him a little. He comes back and he realizes that you can't really go around saying stuff like that because these things can come back to haunt you, and it certainly has come back to haunt him in a different way here. And just a quick funny one as well about social media. I don't know if you've seen it, Johnston. I know you're not as active on social media, but the Ring magazine actually tweeted out about Billy Joe. I think it was Billy Joe No Heart Saunders. And it was hilarious because that wasn't supposed to come from the Ring's Twitter account, and loads of people jumped on the back of it, and apparently it turned out there was someone that was helping them with their social media, and he tweeted down, and there's an investigation into it, and he came out and said, basically, we're really sorry, we don't say stuff like that. But that was quite hilarious to see as well, and obviously people was all over the back of that. The Bible of boxing tweeting about certain fighters having no heart, and it kind of felt like a lot of people, a lot of obviously former professionals or current professionals were really slating him as well, and it was a little bit of a witch hunt. But then a lot of people say it's a justified witch hunt because of the way he was with other fighters. So it is swings and roundabouts. The cliche saying it is swings and roundabouts. These things happen. What goes around does come around, and I hope it does humble him as a person and as a fighter. And I hope other fighters take note of this. The people that maybe have said stuff before, I hope they take note of this scenario, and then they realize that they can't really go and stuff like that. So, yeah, that was it. That was the main fight. It was good to watch. I enjoyed it. Did it live up to expectation? I think so. I think it gave me what I was looking for out of it. So I was quite happy with that. But obviously, there is other fights on the undercard, which I just want to briefly run through before I talk about the fight on the Friday night involving another British fighter. So Kieran Conway came up short, split decision lost to Sissoko on the undercard of that fight, which was quite an interesting fight to watch as well. There was another couple of fighters I wanted to mention. One in particular that we had on our Wants to Watch show. Mark Castro, he got another victory. He goes 3-0 now. And he looks like a guy who could be another future star, which is why I got him on the Ones to Watch. I was really happy to acquire him for one of them episodes because he really does look like a future star. And we keep putting him on the Canelo undercards, and I honestly envisage him to be a headliner in the next 18 months to 2 years. Another fighter, Keyshawn Davis, got another victory on there. He goes 3-0 now. So all these great prospects on the undercard. It's really good to see some of these, and it's great, obviously, to be able to watch them, of course, through the DAZN app. So that was Billy Joe Saunders and Canelo. But on Friday night, there was a fight that went under the radar as Liam Smith went over to Russia to challenge for the Intercontinental WBO title. Again, the bullshit title. But Man, that was a great fight. That was a really, really good fight. And a lot of people felt Liam Smith came up short in that fight. It felt like he was hard done by home advantage. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great fight. I've fully immersed myself in it, and I thought Liam Smith put on a good performance. But I suppose going to you, Johnston, the question is, was it as much of a robbery as what people are saying?
No, to put it bluntly, I think I was worried about it. I went. We do our little prediction league show, so I stuck in. I went for Liam. Not many did. I think with it being in Russia, you're going to side with the fight. A bit like we've mentioned with Canelo, is that he goes in a few rounds up. I think you find that in Germany, in Russia, but now in Britain as well, it is flipped over here now where we're about our fighters having a slight advantage. But it was a good fight, decent performance from Liam and Kurbanov. Yeah. I thought he fought really well. I watched a little bit of him before, and his stance is sort of to the side, and he sort of flicks out that jab, and then looks for the right hand. I quite like the way he performed on the night. I was impressed with him. Looking at his CV before the fight, there wasn't really any big names in there, and Liam he's a workhorse. Liam Smith. He will go in there and he will keep going. The only one that's ever really put an end to him was obviously Canelo a few years ago with them body shots. But Kubanov, I thought he'd done really well. I was impressed with him. I felt Liam just edged it, but I wouldn't have been upset. I wasn't upset that he lost it. Obviously, Liam probably was. I think if you flip reversal it, the fight was that close. If he was over here, Smith would have probably had it by a couple of points, and people would have been saying Smith didn't deserve it. It was a close fight. Maybe they should do it again in a neutral arena or something. But look, Kurbanov, he's one to look out for. He's not a bad fighter. I don't think he's going to be a world beater. Could he be a world champion potentially? But Liam, yeah, it's back to drawing board for him, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't think it was a robbery though. I don't know. What would you rate it, Sean?
Nah, not a robbery. Absolutely not a robbery.
No.
Quite easily scored either way. I think you look at the fight and you look at, I think the early rounds were taken by Kabanov. And then I think obviously Liam Smith started to come on a bit stronger. But I think what you've got to remember, we go back to the conversation we was having earlier about how you judge a fight. And obviously, do you look for clean punches being landed? And I think Liam Smith was taking a lot to come in on the inside and land his shots. And I think he was taking quite a few on the way in. And I think that was my sort of issue with people saying it was a robbery and Smith should have won it. You've got to look at, Kabanov was actually landing, quite a few jabs and right hands as Smith is trying to make his way in. And as Smith gets in, he lands a few shots quite cleanly as well. But the volume of the punches for me came more from Kabanov than it did for Liam Smith until the latter round. The latter rounds is where Smith started to sort of try to pile on the pressure, but it looked like he was hurt quite a few times. So, I mean, you look at the fact that you're in their country, you look at the judges that are there looking at this fight, a home crowd behind them, possibly influencing every time a shot lands. They're cheering it on. Even if a shot only lands on the gloves, they're cheering it on. What are these judges looking at? Are they looking at the guy who's throwing more shots, even if he doesn't always land a shot? It goes back to that conversation about how you judge it. I personally want it on how many shots have been landed on the fighter, but if you've got all these other things going against you, you can't really argue a robbery because, like you said, if that was in Liverpool, that was at the Echo Arena in Liverpool, and it would have been Smith on the other end of the people would have been Smith got a great win. Would they say in Kabanov got absolutely robbed? I don't think anyone would have even said that. So again, I think it's how you perceive that fight. And for me, Liam Smith just didn't do enough early on to get the victory, and he came on a little bit too late in the fight, and that's why he lost the fight for me. I don't think it was a case of home advantage or a biased judging. I actually think it was a well scored fight. If I'm being totally honest, it was one of the more well scored fights quite recently, and I think Kabanov got his just desserts. And like you said, he's a contender now in that division. He's a contender in the super welterweight division because for him now, he's got the opportunity to move on to fight some of these guys at the top level. He's put himself in the position with that bullshit title. It puts him in the rankings where he needs to be to potentially challenge the champions of the division. So for him, that's great. For Liam Smith, I honestly don't know what happens for him. Does he ever get another shot up at world level now? I don't think he's ever going to get the likes of Jaime Munguia's or Canelo's again. I think if we're lucky for Liam Smith, we might see him with another domestic super welterweight who's on the cusp maybe of moving on in a bit of a passing of the guard fight. I think that maybe that's the best he's going to get. I honestly can't see him being in a world title fight again. And if he ever does get in a world title fight, it'll only be because the champion's using him as a voluntary, and that'll be it for me. I don't think he gets to that. He gets to that level again. Personally, I think he stays down now, sort of mid European level, and maybe some of the domestic fighters in the super welterweight division challenge him. The Ted Cheesemans, the Anthony Fowlers. I mean, Anthony Fowler versus Liam Smith in the super welterweight division in Liverpool, when people are allowed back in fully, that'll sell a shitload of money. It'll sell a shitload of tickets, it'll make a shitload of money. And they'll definitely be able to maybe even stick it on pay-per-view because it'll have the beef behind it. Of course it will. It'll have the sibling rivalry type thing going on, and there'll be loads of stuff to even sell that fight. So that's kind of where I see Liam Smith's career going from now. But no, not a robbery, definitely not. And that was the boxing from this weekend, Johnston. That was everything we covered. But there was one thing I wanted to discuss with you as we come towards the end of this episode now, and I don't normally like to give this a lot of airtime, but Logan Paul, Floyd Mayweather, what do you think about that circus?
The most I've seen of it was Logan Paul nicking Mayweather's hat.
Well, that was his brother, wasn't it? Paul who nicked the hat.
I was at his brother. See, that's what there you go. So all I see is one of them nick his hat, and then they were like chasing him around and hustled him back to get the hat back. Look, I don't know, mate. I suppose if there's anything that's good that's gonna come from it, I'm hoping we get a new set of fans that will come and actually watch the sport and not watch the people that are playing this massive. It's like wrestling, isn't it? It is a wrestling thing. Like Mayweather, anywhere there's a good $100,000, or I say $100 million are involved, then you're going to see Floyd Mayweather. It was the worst. That was what for me that from when he became Money Mayweather and started chasing the money, I lost a lot of interest in Floyd. I'm not surprised there's going to be a circus around it. Are they actually going to fight it? I don't know. All I know is I've seen him nick the hat, and if they did fight, what weight would it be? I don't even know.
It's an exhibition. Logan Paul probably, I think he's
right.
Super middleweight, maybe even like heavyweight. I don't.
Okay.
And this is as much as my knowledge extends to these two brothers. I think Logan Paul super middleweight, like heavyweight. He might even be cruiserweight. I don't even know. But I know it's an exhibition. I know it's happening, and I think it's June the 6th. And it's just another way of these two guys are cashing in. At the end of the day, I said this on another podcast that I was on yesterday, and I was talking about the fact that, if anything, the only credit you can give to these two individuals is the fact that they're very shrewd businessmen. It's because they know that these two going in the ring, creating a bit of hype and circus around it, is going to put the bums on the seats. It's going to get the pay-per-view buys, and both of them are going to be walking away laughing to the bank and probably shaking each other's hand and giving each other big hugs in the dressing room after the fight, and probably like that with the money to each other because they've duped everybody really. They've gone, yeah, look at all these fools that are watching us and we're getting all this money for it. And that's why it doesn't interest me in the slightest, because I know it is just a cash grab and that's all it is. So a lot of true boxing fans won't watch it. For people bringing it over to the sport, bringing new faces, new people that might want to go to a boxing gym, in that respect, if it does achieve that, then that's not a completely bad thing. But for the most part of it, it's just I don't like it. I don't envisage it to be the best thing for the sport. But then there's a lot of pros and a lot of people in the media side of the sport that actually do believe it might bring new faces, new attractions to the sport and keep the sport alive in that respect. So you've got to kind of look at it from different angles really as to how it's going to.
On the flip side of it as well, though. So on the flip side of it as well, Joe, is the amount of money they're making. I mean, you got this guy that's earning an absolute fortune. And what is it? Was it his second or third professional fight? And we've got fighters that are struggling to make ends meet when they're fighting for intercontinental titles. It's crazy. It just shows you that the power of social media at the minute, doesn't it? It just shows you if you're an influencer, then no matter what you do, if you've got the backing behind you, you're going to earn a load of money, whatever field you step into. So even if it was onto a football, going football wise or wherever, UFC, you're going to get that huge following with you, and they want to watch you. So I suppose the one thing of note is other boxers out there, to try and obviously maybe look at trying to expose themselves more on social media, using it in a positive way for them to get more exposure, and then they can sell more tickets, I suppose, earn more money from it. But then the other side of it is how much of it, as if you're an actual fighter and you want to box, your time is consumed with making sure you train hard, you eat the right things, you're away from your family. The last thing you're going to want to be doing is sitting around acting like a dickhead on social media, but people lap it up, don't they? This is it. So I don't know whether we're going to eventually, I think we're going to end up seeing these crossover fighters where you have these young boys that are influencers, but also they're good boxers as well, and they can do both. And that's probably the way of fighters selling tickets at the minute. So yeah, you can't ignore it because of the money they're earning.
No, you can. You really can. And it'll be interesting to see, how things do progress in terms of the sport over the next 10 years. I mean, we could be talking about this in 10 years and it could be the thing that helps keep the sport alive. We just don't know. But guys, I think that's it. I think that's it for this one, Johnston, for our reaction show to Canelo and Saunders. And again, guys, it's always a pleasure to come to you. We've got a couple of interviews coming up in the not too distant future. And by the end of the month, we're looking to get our career profile of Jack Johnston out there for you all. So please do bear with us. Obviously, we've had a few things going on in the background, as you're all well aware of. So thanks for sticking with us. The patrons in particular, you guys, you get benefits from being a patron. So we're going to get a couple of early access episodes out to you in the next couple of weeks. And that Johnston episode will be coming out at the end of the month. And then we'll get back on the track with obviously Legendary Nights and start preparing for Dark Side of Boxing season 2. Because of course you'll have seen a few interviews with us in recently. So, we're really excited about all that as well. So you know where to find us at BTR Boxing Pod on Twitter and on Facebook, the BTR Boxing Podcast Network, and of course on Instagram as well. And please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you leave a review. We really appreciate all the recent reviews. We really do appreciate you giving us feedback about us butchering names and places, because it is absolutely hilarious to read, and we'll try our best to get the right names and the right places. But guys, as always, thank you so much, Johnston. Thank you again as always, and we'll see you fight fans next time.